Hi, welcome to Summer of the Arts Creative Conversations. My name is Eric Johnson. I am the Development Director with Summer of the Arts. And today our creative conversation is with Dave Zollo. So Dave is a well-known Iowa City musician. We're going to learn more about his past, his profession, what he does. So I looked over your professional biography a little bit, but before we start on that, I'd really like to know more of a personal biography. How did music enter your life?
So let's see. I was raised here in the Iowa City area, and then as well in a town called Wellman, which is south of here, about 25 miles. My mother's father was a professional piano player and led the orchestra at a place called the Stork Club in Manhattan for many years. And was a part of just a certain kind of generation in the early 20s who left home. He was 18 and he left home to join a vaudeville, the vaudeville circuit, to play jazz, and it was not accepted by his family. So, and he came up on vaudeville with Pee Wee Russell, Jack Teagarden, who became huge names, especially during the Dixieland revival. But more how he's known today is he was Bobby Hackett's mentor. So Bobby Hackett was a guitar player, a 17-year-old guitar player who my grandfather hired to repay a debt to some gangster he had worked for during Prohibition. This was 33, so this was the year that Prohibition was lifted. Right. And he had hired Pee Wee Russell, who was down on his luck. He'd been playing with Bix Beiderbecke in St. Louis, and Beiderbecke had died a year and a half before. So he sent Pee Wee Russell a train ticket, and then he got a call and said, "Hey, you got to hire this kid. Prodigy, just finished high school," and it was Bobby Hackett. And so after the gig one night, my grandfather took the dough from the gig and bought a cornet and said to Pee Wee, "Hey, you're going to teach this guy to play like Bix." And that's exactly what happened. Hackett went on to be Louis Armstrong's, favorite, one of his favorite trumpet, cornet players. So that was something. He died my grandfather died when I was 8, but I was well aware of his presence. So then that was my mom's dad. My father, my family came here to Iowa City so my dad could attend the writer's workshop, the fiction workshop in 1970. So I was a little baby. My dad was a music fanatic, with a huge record collection and a love for rock and roll. That's still to this day, I've never met anyone, who had the same kind of zealot's love for the music. I think from the time he was a little kid, he first heard Chuck Berry and Hank Williams Sr. and Jimmy Reed. Those are his holy trinity. That he was probably 7 or 8, and that. So so my dad was always playing music, records, and my mom was less of a music fanatic. She grew up around it. More so than my dad. It was something exotic to my dad, I think, always. So I started taking piano lessons at a place called the Music Shop, this little hippie run. I think it's where Giovanni's is, or was. Is Giovanni still there? I got to get out more often, man. Yeah. So anyway, it was on the Ped Mall. So this would have been, right during Urban Renewal. I was probably 5. I took lessons there for maybe a year and a half. And then I don't know that they shut down because of Urban Renewal. Anyway, and then I took a couple years off, and then Prusel. We finally got in. I got into Prusel. There was a bit of even back, in the mid-70s, a waiting list. So I was 8, which was old for Suzuki, but I did my Twinkle Twinkle Little Star right there, and and the rest is not history, but the rest is what I did going forward. So I was at Prusel till I was 17.
And that's the Prusel School of Music.
Yeah, Prusel School of Music here, and it was in the same place the main campus, I guess, which is the old Czech Hall by Horace Mann Elementary, and now they've got the bigger, newer studio up on the north side.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, there's such a great community
Oh, it's
institution.
such a great resource, yeah. And, I still see the Prussels occasionally. My son studied with the same teacher that I had there from the ages of 11 to 17. And so he was there for, I think, from the age of 8. He had a much more success doing the Suzuki curriculum than I did. But yeah, that's, me and my child both, our lives were deeply touched by the Prussel family and by that school and by Laurie Chrisman, who was our teacher. So, we are very, connected musically and personally to the community because of that.
That's fantastic. So it seems like we've got some themes here that are running through your whole life, right? Because you've got this family tradition of music. Mm-hmm. And it's not just a family tradition of music, it's also a family tradition that includes professional musicianship.
Yeah.
And then you've got some writing in there too,
yeah.
because you're a songwriter
yeah.
as well.
Yes.
So I can see a lot of that. And then also a tradition of kind of community involvement, of being active in the community
absolutely.
and being connected to the
the
place where you're at.
Some of my earliest memories were at protests about urban renewal downtown Iowa City, now that we bringing that all the way around. No, and my parents were very, they were both first generation college students, ethnic, East Coast, children of immigrants really, and or second generation maybe in my mom's case, but yeah, it definitely was something that was important to them, that thing about being involved in your community and having a voice and the importance of education. I'm sure it'll always be heartbreaking to my mom that I did not pursue a career in academics. She knew how hard the life of a musician was.
Yeah.
She saw it with her father, even though I give my kind of the bullet points of my grandpa's career, and it sounds, like it was, he was, he's playing behind Walter Winchell broadcasts, but he certainly wasn't enjoying the life that Walter Winchell was.
Right.
It was a hustle for him, and you know what? Very similar, I think, to what my life has ended up being as a 31 years as a professional musician. But an independent professional musician.
Right, right.
Yeah. Even though I belong to my union, damn it. And you should too.
Those structures have changed, and boy, that's something that if we wanted to, we could probably talk about for a couple hours, too, the way that professional musicians' lives have changed.
It's changed, drastically. It's funny. So I look back to the early 90s when I was getting my start, and my mentors were guys who had been around these parts playing. Some of them I knew through, my dad was friends with a lot of area musicians, and some I didn't, but they were all always talking about the fact that, the music business hadn't gone. It was still the same as it was. We're still making the same dough as we made in '72. It's like, we'd be happy, to be making that dough. And it's just, the modality has shifted so abruptly to a new place. The technology just changed overnight.
Yeah.
And it's funny, all that talk about the internet being this great democratizing feature for music, there's some truth to that, but it's the Copyright Act, the Millennial Copyright Act basically made sure that, digital music wasn't going to pay musicians anything. And so you got to get thousands and thousands and thousands of plays before you start seeing any money. So now, who did I just hear? I heard an older musician, Carmine, the drummer,
Carmine Appice?
Yeah. Did he pronounce it Appice?
Probably not.
Yeah, right. He's got the Italian. Anyway, from Vanilla Fudge. He spun his sticks back in '67, before I was born. He was talking. He said there's no money in songwriting because he wrote a bunch of he had a bunch of hit songs. Mm-hmm. Now there's no. He said he's basically 7 or whatever he is, and he's like, man, the only money I can make now is touring.
Yeah.
So all that money that was, publishing money, mailbox money as they call it, poof, gone. And the convenient fact that there's no records to sell means that everything is being, funneled through that, that narrow channel of digital whatever. Streaming now, not downloads anymore. It's streaming, and there's very little money there.
Yeah. So let's backtrack a little bit. How
Sorry.
did you get into this? No apologies. It's a creative conversation. That's what we do.
There you go. All right.
So how did you get into this hustle?
Well,
First.
like I said, I grew up around, my dad was good friends with a musician named Patrick Hazel, another piano player. I mean, as rare as piano players are these days, there's a lot of piano players in my personal story. And Pat, who also had, I think, he lived in Washington, Iowa. And his kids are good friends of mine still. And so Pat had been in a band with Bo Ramsey and Joe Price called Mother Blues. It was a real seminal Iowa music kind of co-op. And they had a life before Bo and Joe. Pat, this was like they opened for Led Zeppelin at the Field House in like 1969. They're very avant-garde. Then I think, if I remember right, I think their lead guitar player played from a wheelchair and was a paraplegic. And they did more kind of jazz influenced stuff. Pat's a brilliant musician. So I saw those guys.
Wow.
And so for me, I had my grandfather in one regard, who I knew made a living his entire life playing music, and then even surviving rock and roll, which a lot of guys didn't from his.
Yeah.
Him and Hackett both moved to Cape Cod and started a little jazz community there, and that supported them the rest of their lives. But I saw these guys doing it around me, and that to me, seeing people doing that meant that it was a vocation. I tell people this: growing up in Iowa City, what's unique about growing up in Iowa City, what's special about it, is that nobody ever said to me, "You're freaking crazy. Like, you can't do that. You're not. That's not a job." I mean, nobody ever said that, because artists are everywhere here.
Yeah.
The printmaking program was when I started playing music, was world renowned. The workshop, there was playwrights, there's fine artists, there's every single kind of artist you can imagine roaming this. Poets, for God's sake, still real live poets, and everywhere you looked. In fact, I used to see. I worked at Prairie Lights after high school, and I'd see Donald Justice come in a 3-piece suit and a hat. It's like, wow. Yeah. So it was like growing up in Iowa City and around Iowa City. It was that it wasn't such a far-fetched idea that I might wind up being a musician.
Yeah.
Why the hell not, right?
Yeah.
It was possible to me because I saw other people do it, and that's so important for young people to be able to look around and say, "Hey, that's what these guys are doing. That's what they do. I'm an itinerant musician. I travel around, play one-nighters.
Yeah.
And if you got the constitution for it, you can still scrape out a living if you don't mind getting on stage and performing every 5 nights a week."
Yeah. So you started playing with a band called High Lonesome.
High and Lonesome.
High and Lonesome.
Yeah. A common mistake. We got threatened with a lawsuit by a guy on General Hospital. He was a drummer for a band called the High Lonesome, and his lawyer called and said, "You guys have to change your name." And I said, "We've got 3 records out. Screw you." And we're High and Lonesome, like the Jimmy Reed song. Yeah. It's a blues thing. You take your bluegrass shit out, whatever. Take it. Sorry, excuse me. It was just like so weird. It's like, he's on General Hospital. Yeah, I don't care.
Right.
I'm sorry for him, but I'm sure it paid the bills.
Yeah, so. And the "and" makes a difference.
Yes, it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you struck out in 1998 on your own?
Yeah. Yep. So 97, 98. So I had been in a little detour. I lived in Nashville for a little over a year. Around then, I had a surgery on my larynx. They had found some tumors in my larynx, and so they did a reconstructive surgery here at the world-renowned otolaryngology clinic at UIHC, and saved my voice, but it took a long time to come back. And so that was early 95 that I had the surgery. So in 96, I played a show with a guy named Todd Snyder, who we now see comes through a couple times a year at the Englert. And I opened a show, and then he asked me to come to Ames and then to Minneapolis, and then he offered me the job playing piano in his band. So I did that for a year, and then I came back here after that, I had started a record label
Right.
in '95. So right around or '94, just before I had the surgery, called Trailer Records. And
Yeah.
and so I kind of had some help here, and you know, let's face it, I mean, I didn't know anything about running a record label anyway, so it was all by the seat of my pants. So, yeah, so I was down in Nashville for that year, and then I came back, and then I ended up working with Todd a bunch more throughout the early 2000s, mid 2000s. But yeah, so that was kind of where I found myself. And High and Lonesome was a really popular band, you know, kind of college town band. And a lot of people said, oh, you know, you got to keep the band together. It was like Spinal Tap, man. And, you know, the band it was untenable. There was all kinds of reasons why that band couldn't stay together. And so, yeah, I just did the next thing, which was, at that point, by '98, I already felt like, even though I was just 29 years old, I felt like my path was, you know, what am I going to sell insurance to somebody? And they're not going to buy it from me, probably. So, I mean, I just felt like that whether it was a choice I made, or even I felt at times like it was a calling or a choice that was made for me, here I am. I mean, after that surgery, and after, you know, not being able to talk, or you know, not knowing if I get my voice back, and then singing in public for 10 years as my voice regained some of its original shape, it just, every year further on in my career felt like another nail in my coffin as to whether I would ever do anything else. So, you know, and I did do other things. You know, I produced a number of records, but it was all music based.
Yeah.
And I've loved it, you know. I love the work. I mean, there's no way you keep doing this if you don't love the work. But again, I mean, there's a part of me that felt like it was, you know, the longer I did it, the more it was destined to happen, for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, you know, part of the range, just to show some of the geographic range of what you've done, the very first thing you were associated with that I knew about, that I ever heard about, was that Greg Brown record on Trailer Records.
Oh, yeah.
Over and Under.
Yeah, Over and Under, which was some of his fans' favorite record.
Oh, it's
a great record.
It's probably my favorite of his records, and I love, you know, and there's some organ that you do on one of those songs. I was like, I can hear that in my head right now. I can hear it where it comes in. It's a fantastic record. And then a few years later, I was working sound at a little bar in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and you came through.
That's right.
And I've got the poster right here.
The Chucker.
The Chucker.
I
in
do believe the
Alabama.
first time I played the Chucker, I think we played there before this show, and I don't know if you were. I don't think you were doing sound.
I wasn't there yet.
But it was like, I remember. So we were working with Dan Nolan from Birmingham and Atlanta, and he was like, "Yes, so you're playing this place called the Chucker, and it's." They sell alcohol, and I was like, oh, "That's good. Like, don't they all sell alcohol?" And he's like, "Not in Alabama." And then he said, "Yeah, they're open all night." I said, "Because we were starting at like 1 a.m. on a Tuesday."
Yeah.
I was like, "Who the hell is gonna be playing?" You know, like listening to rock and roll in 2002, especially,
right,
at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday, and like. They will at the Chucker. It was like a concrete bunker, a cinder block. There was couches there. You know, I remember taking a nap on one of the couches.
Rectangular room.
Yep. Yeah. So we met there.
We met there upstairs. We ended up. My wife knew you from the Iowa City.
From the Deadwood.
And we ended up having a conversation that actually helped encourage me to move up here and apply to the American Studies program. And then a couple of years later, when I'm in graduate school, that American Studies program gave you an honorary degree, honorary master's degree.
No, it wasn't. I wasn't. They worked at getting me an honorary degree, but they really.
I remember that we had you come in.
I'm not throwing anyone under the bus here, but myself. So
we had you come in and we honored you.
No. The department's been great, and Lauren Rabinovitz assumed, since I had defended my honors thesis, that's supposed to be the last semester of school.
Right.
But I had badgered them to let me do it sooner. And so I did it, and then I dropped out, which I promised my honors committee I would not do. And then I did it. I just ran into John Rayburn, hi John, at Prairie Lights, and the first thing that popped into my head was, wow, I sure screwed John over with that, didn't I? And that was, 35 years ago. Just like the albatross, Coleridge's albatross hanging around my neck. But so Lauren Rabinovitz, who was also on my honors committee, God bless her, went to the department and said, "Can't we just get this guy, this ubiquitous musician, an honorary
This guy who's
degree?"
done so much work, community,
And then
musical, and academic.
She was like, "I didn't realize you were 18 hours shy of your degree." Then they said they would let me back in and let me graduate with honors. And I just, I took a couple, I had been having some health problems. I took some courses, and I just realized when I took the American Studies course, it was called American Political Humor. And the first half of the class was Sigmund Freud. I'm like, he's not American, and he sure as hell ain't funny. And I clearly missed the boat. The boat sailed away without me, and I was on shore waving it as it went away, and can't do it, sorry.
Yeah.
So I just, those 18 hours, plus there was an Algebra 2 class in there, and it was just like,
Oh, yeah.
my son, much to his great delight, who is a math whiz, is just like, "What do you mean? Should I take it for you?" I was like, "Son, that'll get you thrown out of school. Don't even say that out loud." Yeah, can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't
Well,
do it.
I mean, these are all, the academic life is a
Yeah.
particular
Yeah, yeah,
choice
yeah.
that
Well,
requires a devotion.
My
The musical life.
My honors thesis was about my grandfather's life and the life of that generation of jazz musicians. Had I known how many similarities my own path would have to his, I might not have done it. I mean, honestly, it was, I was looking at a life in academia. The third, I've now name-checked all three of my honors advisors, was a guy named Tom Lutz. Mm-hmm. Tom Lutz has had a successful academic career because his dissertation was published in People magazine. I'm probably speaking so much out of school here, but that's, I mean, I'm sure it got him as much grief, as it did, accolades. Tom was a brilliant guy. I did a lot of work with him. He was my main honors advisor. He was also a rock and roll piano player who had paid some of his way through his time at Stanford playing the piano in rock bands. And he said, "You won't like academia." And, he's probably right. And so I took that to heart because I did like rock and roll. I mean, there was no doubt about that. It's like, okay, I get to play the piano and get paid and, have a few drinks, which,
Well, there's probably a place where he had to make a choice. The piano.
Oh, no question.
Or academia.
Yeah.
And there's a place where you had to make a choice.
That's absolutely right.
And the piano got you.
Yeah. And just thought the songwriting, to me, the piano was always more of an avenue for me to express myself in songs. So, I never, even though I've done a lot of work as a side person and in various bands and really for great songwriters, I've always considered myself, more of a singer-songwriter than a piano player, just because, I know some really great piano players, and I ain't one. I mean, like Radoslav Lorkovich, when I see him play, it's just like, my hands don't have those notes in my hands. They're not there.
He came back and played for.
He's with Asleep at the Wheel now.
Last summer at the Iowa City.
He's part of the band.
Iowa Arts Fest.
And he's and so he was around when I was growing up, and also had worked with Bo and Greg, as I did. So and another great person to look up to. But it was I mean, all these things did come together, and then I did a lot of touring between 1992 and about 2006. I played at least, a couple hundred nights a year on average.
Wow.
And that's a lot, especially considering they were mostly one-nighters, if not all one-nighters, but mostly, certainly. And all over the place. And I still go to Europe. I did until the pandemic, where I've had, some areas where my work has become known, and mostly through touring. And then some magazines in Italy, a magazine called Buscadero, which is a great magazine, did some really nice reviews of the first High and Lonesome record. Yeah. And then, so anyway, you find the different ways though that you can make a living, and it is a hustle. I mean, especially being here where there's no industry. To me, the greatest thing about living in Iowa City is that there isn't an industry. When I went to Nashville, it was like, industry town. God, now I see where that phrase came from. It was god awful. Like everything was shaped by these market forces that it was silly. Some of the stuff that I was told by people in positions of real power, and it was also insulting, like to the intelligence of the audience. It was just like, wow, you really think that? So there's no industry here, so that kind of commodification of music, that whole thing doesn't happen.
Yeah.
At the same time, it means you've got to hustle if you want to make a living. So, I ended up doing a lot of different things, like I said, producing, playing just as a piano player, and then playing as a solo act, playing with a band. And it's great. I mean, I love it. I love the fact that I can do all those different things, but definitely, it's the real, that's the real dichotomy of this, of working here. But to me, the sense of place and being from here is way more important than anything else anyway. So, and it's informed so much of my music.
I'm so happy that you put down roots here.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. So you were talking about this a minute ago, about the piano as an expressive force, and you were also talking about, and you've talked about the hustle. Is it sometimes hard, or how do you balance the artistic expression? Because you put out several albums as a songwriter,
right? But
how do you balance that artistic expression with what you need to do for live performance?
Yeah. I have been fortunate that I've, not had to play, all covers. The covers that I play because I choose to play them.
Yeah.
And I've they've kind of evolved anyway into fit my, whatever, my primitive style. But, so I haven't been forced to make that choice. Thinking about it, I think, doing what I do as a performer, if I was up there playing songs, another person wrote, I could do that. Like that, to me, would be a better day than most other days' work that I can imagine. But I've been able to, the work that I do, the gigs that I've done, have been doing mostly my own music. If not exclusively my own music. So that's a blessing, and that's a blessing. I'm very aware of the fact that the people of the state of Iowa, because if I don't have a record out, this is where most of my work happens, is in a 5 or 6 hour radius around here, and a lot of it's in the state, have supported me.
That's great.
And it's essential, and have grown to know these songs, and so I can perform those songs, and that's that's what the records are for anyway. So you can familiarize people with the music, with the work itself. So, but everybody strikes that balance though. Every artist strikes that balance. So it's just a matter of I've always been able to also find joy in the moment. Like find that if I'm playing a show for 5 people somewhere where I'm not known, I can find that joy in whatever human connection I'm having. And I'm not saying, I'll just pick one person and emote and we'll connect. Not like that. Just like I'm well aware of the fact I'm very blessed to do what I do because of how much joy it brings me, and it's really saved my life. And it sounds like melodrama, but it has. I've had some rough patches. The rock and roll lifestyle is not always the healthiest lifestyle, shall we say. So I'm aware of that, and the moment, the magic to me is in that moment, the moment when you're performing and when there's that that connection that gets made. So at the end of the day, it's not much of a choice. Again, it's that sense that you're engaged in something. Like for me, at the risk of sounding, even more pompous, there's something sacrosanct about it, like about the act of it. To me, didn't grow up in a church, so to me, there's something, that's almost, it's got a bit of the religious, I don't know what the right way. I mean, there's a certain amount of theater in both things, I guess. But the work itself is what it's about. So the doctrine. I mean, I now attend a church, and have for the last number of years. But that's the point is, I guess, even it seems even more that way. There's something kind of yeah, what you're doing, you know, getting up there and doing these things night in and night out and repeating these things as an affirmation.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you called it a calling earlier.
Yeah,
You know, and
yeah,
this
it
all
has
to
that
me
feeling,
sounds
yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
how someone would describe a calling, whether
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
religious or academic or
Yep.
musical. But
Yeah.
it's something that's not just a job.
Yeah, and I try not to get, you know, too far. I mean, when I was, you know, younger, I definitely, there was times where I would kind of lose sight of you know, what I was doing and just, you know, how much how much more grateful I should be to be able to do it, because you have, you know, there's other things motivating my younger self that I just realized are not important now.
Yeah.
So that's that.
So what's the future hold for you?
You know, I tell people this, and they think I'm like being, you know, falsely modest, but I kind of feel like I'm on the downslope. You know, like I would like to see young people have, in this community, the opportunity that I had to make music. And I think, as usual, you know, like as the Who said, the kids are all right. Everybody's doing what they need to be doing, and in fact, there's certain resources that weren't here when I was starting out. You know, it always felt like we lacked a venue the size of the Engler, and that's here now. And I love it that they're programming local music. I see regularly, which is awesome, and they're bringing in great. You know, they're doing just what it should be, because it is a community theater, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah,
it seems like they've got the best of both worlds going on. So, you know, I might do some teaching. I might do some. You know, I've stayed closer and closer to home. My son is now in college,
Right.
and I'm watching him, you know, become an adult, which is wonderful and gratifying and transcendent. Makes me feel old as a mother. So, and I am. I mean, I've got a lot of miles. Like, it's, you know, I try to tell people like, oh, 400,000 miles on that engine. It's the highway miles. Like, it's light miles.
You're not just going to the store and back.
I've been driven through city streets with no oil in the crankcase for a long time, and it, you know, I'm feeling it sometimes. But again, I love the work, so, you know, that's beautiful. That will not change. I'm guessing as I get older, I'll be less inclined to work as much. But I mean, I think the last 2 years, I've probably done 125, 150 shows. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Coming out of the pandemic. And again, a debt of gratitude is owed to the people who attend those shows and allow those things to happen, because it's been a scary couple of years too for a lot of people, myself included.
Yeah. Well, you know, it is always a joy to see you on stage doing what you
Thank
do.
you,
I
Eric.
haven't seen you a bunch recently the last couple of years. I can attest to that.
Yeah. I feel like I've finally aged into some kind of wisdom about what I do. And, you know, that's a good place to be. I'd much rather finish up there than be the guy at the end of the bar at the Dead Book going, back in my day, this shit was cool. Everyone's like, okay, Gramps, yeah, bye-bye. Let's go next door. Let's go to George's. Okay. Don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. So this has been Creative Conversations with David Zollo. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Look for more creative conversations on Summer of the Arts YouTube channel. Thank you for being here.